of Fury, The Legend of Hank. Let me just say right now that the fact this movie even exists and that we're able to watch it is kind of a miracle, because I never thought that this project would ever see the light of day. What do I mean? Well, if you've been an animation fan for a while, then maybe the name Blazing Samurai sounds familiar to you. For several years, there have been talks about this animated feature that was like a remake of one of Mel Brooks' most acclaimed comedies, Blazing Saddles. But instead of an adult feature with a Western theme where a black man becomes a sheriff, it's an animated family film where a dog wants to be a samurai. Kind of weird to make a Mel Brooks comedy kid-friendly, but then again, I guess I've heard worse ideas. They promise to have an interesting all-star cast like Michael Cera, Samuel L. Jackson, Ricky Gervais, George Takei, and even Mel Brooks himself, but it had a very complicated production. I'd love to talk about it, but I recommend instead to just check out Pan Pizza's video he made back in 2019. Seriously, it's a wild story. From then on, it was always presumed that this movie was forever lost in development hell with only concept art that showed evidence of its existence and this poster that was meant to prepare us for the film, with the prominent view of a sumo cat's butt. But then everything changed in 2019. Suddenly, Blazing Samurai was slowly but surely coming back to life. And while news regarding its progress was slow, and, well, with a good reason, it became progressively clear that this movie will finally be made, and we will have that animated samurai-themed Blazing Saddles. Regardless of what I'll say about the movie itself, no one can deny that it does have a fascinatingly crazy production history that could make quite a story in itself. So now that the wait is over for the Blazing Samurai to unleash its Paws of Fury, will this match up to the standards of Blazing Saddles? Or is this nothing but a blazing disaster? Let's find out. The story. As crazy as it may sound, yes, this is indeed an animated remake of Blazing Saddles with plenty of notable similarities to justify that statement. As the evil ruler Ikachu plots to remove the small town of Kakamucho, Hank gets his opportunity to be a samurai by being in charge of protecting the town. However, since he is a dog in a land that is populated completely by cats, he has a long way to gain their trust so that he could save them all, and a lot of training from a former legend named Jimbo.
He has told you his weakness. Remember, you defeat strength with smart. Now get back out there!
But of course, even beyond the switch of cowboys to samurais, there are also plenty of notable differences too to make the feature kid-friendly. I mean, you can't have a movie like this to include an old lady yelling out, "Up yours!" However, when it comes to these differences, they mostly share a common theme as to how Paws of Fury is such an inferior feature in almost every way. Some may say that this is a lesser version because it's aimed for kids, but there's actually a more logical explanation as to why. And it's because Paws of Fury does something that Mel Brooks is never known for: playing safe. Brooks is a comedic legend for always pushing the envelope and go outside the realm of what is considered to be socially acceptable to both give people a laugh and to also have something to say. In the case of Blazing Saddles, while admittedly it is a bit outdated by today's standards and can be a little hypocritical too, but part of why it's a classic is because of how it mocks bigotry. How it delivers a clever commentary of how racism and white nationalism are just synonyms for stupidity, and never shies away to fully present the characters as discriminatory as possible in order to make fun of them and to make the protagonists look more appealing and likable. Paws of Fury had that chance to retain that anti-racism message with the cats and dogs allegory to have a similar approach to Zootopia, but instead, the film decided to throw that out the window in favor of the generic "be a true hero" message, thus losing the most significant substance that Blazing Saddles is known for and make the entire film feel bland. So without any of that edge or societal commentary, this story is nothing but a poorly crafted coming-of-age tale with not much to latch onto and leaving it to be apathetically predictable.
Bad dog! Don't talk to him! Did you touch him? Time to use our hand sanitizers.
But then again, there is one important aspect about this picture that makes it one of the main reasons as to why people want to see this. The comedy. I mean, if you're going to adapt a Mel Brooks feature, then a critical component to get right is to be funny. After all, most people would forgive the shortcomings if the movie can make them consistently laugh. Well, I'll give that Paws of Fury does try to emulate the comedic style of Mel Brooks, delivering an endless barrage of wacky jokes that's filled with slapstick, smart aleck wit, and breaking the fourth wall.
Sounds like you need help.
Wanna see you win!
Hey, this is the training montage, isn't it?
Don't forget to land on your feet.
And yet, despite all the gags that they consistently throw to the audience, very few of them actually stick. There are probably a handful that did make me laugh and caught me off guard that it was pretty good, but most of them give out that sense that the movie is not as clever as Brooks to pull them off in a way that could at least get a reaction out of the viewer. Not to mention that, ironically enough, with its safe nature of never wanting to go too far, the cartoon ends up being less over the top than the live-action film. I'll give it that it's not horribly cringy or really hateable to the point of making me upset or anything. It's just that the movie is, well, boring. By taking away what makes Blazing Saddles so memorable for the sake of letting kids watch this, it leaves the concept to be dreadfully generic, the comedy to be mostly flat, and the story to be cliched and unoriginal. Even when you take away the Blazing Saddles comparison, what is there to actually remember from this picture? The animation. You'd think that after so many years of being in production, this would allow the feature to have the opportunity to improve upon its animation and create a unique style to make this a visual blast to watch. Or maybe I'm just saying that because of wishful thinking. Honestly, it's hard to imagine how this could have ended up with awe-inspiring animation. This is not to slam the animators or any of the visual team. I'm sure they've done the best they could. I'm just questioning the tools that they use in order to create this feature. I will say that there is a part of me that did understand what they were going for. As a wackier type of comedy, some of the animation is reminiscent to the Looney Tunes, where the character designs of the anthropomorphic animals have a look that is evocative to the golden age of cartoons of the 1940s and 50s, along with playing a role in the humor to emphasize the slapstick so that the execution can be a lot snappier. It does make sense for the style of movie that this is, but again, the technology to create the animation resulted in the feature to look subpar. Granted, this wasn't made by a major well-known studio that has some of the strongest rendering systems, and this reportedly had a relatively smaller budget than the average theatrically released animated feature. So it is a case where the animators were making the most with the materials that they had. But even still, what they were given is rather limited. Despite the style that they were going for, the character animation doesn't go all out to help the comedy, and the backgrounds mostly consist of Kakamucho and Ikachu's palace. The latter, I'll give it that it doesn't look bad, and has some interesting features that the samurais explore, but the rest don't offer much to look at, as they're just the typical ancient Japanese backdrops with a minimal color palette. However, this did not mean that the animators didn't try. In fact, there were a few instances where they wanted to spice up the visuals by showing some 2D scenes and flashbacks that are shown with a comic-like filter that emboldens the colors.
Why do you want to be a samurai?
I lived in a bad part of town full of bad dogs.
Also, I do want to mention that the best part of the feature is the third act, when Hank moves on from the mistakes he made and heads out to save the day. This is where the animation shows off the most potential, delivering most of the best action scenes with the sword fighting and moving camera angles, and most of the best jokes that utilizes the Looney Tunes style. Although not the chaotic ending like in Blazing Saddles, this is where they really let out what this movie is all about. You have the samurai action to highlight the Japanese theming, and humor that shows how Mel Brooks' comedy can translate well into animation. However, this does highlight another significant problem. Again, the best moments, especially the visuals, are only by the third act, meaning that you'd have to sit through so much of the movie before even getting to the good part. Sure, maybe you get a little taste of some decent comedy and action throughout, but they pale in comparison to the climax, where it's kind of not worth it to wait so long only for the movie to start getting a little entertaining. Again, the animation did the most that it possibly could. It had an idea of what it wanted to do, and it's a good one at that, but it's obvious how it doesn't have the proper resources to pull it off well, and that there was so much holding it back where it makes the movie look average at best. The characters. One thing I'll give this movie is that they do have an impressive list of recognizable actors, some of whom stayed committed to the project for several years. That should have been promising because a significant part of what made Blazing Saddles work is the talented actors who knew how to make Mel Brooks' comedy the funniest it can ever be. So if good actors made Saddles great, then that should mean the same for, who the fridge am I kidding? Nobody could make this work. I mean, some of the actors are fine in their own right, but the script is so badly written that no amount of talent can make any of them either memorable or enjoyable. Let's go and start with the top dog of the picture. Out of all the elements in this movie, the protagonist is the biggest downgrade going from Brooks' film to this. In Saddles, Bart was like the live-action version of Bugs Bunny. Despite being a major target just for being who he is, he's still the smartest character of the picture, using his cunning wit to protect the town from the biggest threats and get himself out of whatever trouble Hedy Lamarr,
that's Headley,
throws his way. Unfortunately, since there was nothing clever in Paws of Fury, what we got as a lead instead is Hank, a clumsy and not-so-bright dog who desperately wants to be a samurai. Sure, he's kind of the typical Michael Cera role, and his acting as well for his part, but there's no charm to the guy where he's written off as both generic with his coming-of-age story of figuring out how to be a samurai, and a bit despicable where being a samurai can often get to his head and becomes more egotistical about it.
You're under arrest.
You wanted to be a samurai. Fun, isn't it? Now go get him.
But in order to become that samurai, he needs the help of Jimbo. I'll admit that what is possibly the best thing from this movie is Samuel L. Jackson's performance as the highly disciplined yet witty mentor. But other than that, he's honestly nothing more but the typical former legend that becomes the teacher to the rising star.
But where can I find one?
What? Get out of here! Who even made that?
It's you!
Don't believe everything you read.
Little do they know, however, that their biggest threat who plots to destroy Kakamucho is Ika-Chu, who really is just a villainous Ricky Gervais, or just simply Ricky Gervais, that also has an assistant in the form of George Takei as the dim-witted general. Honestly, I can't help but find Gervais' acting to be weak here. I get that the dry delivery is part of his signature humor, but he consistently sounds so monotone as if he's mostly bored when reading his lines.
I have something to tell you. I am your father.
What?
No, I'm not.
And of course, if you're gonna adapt a Mel Brooks movie, then you might as well get the man himself to voice a character. And in this case, he's kind of reprising his role as the governor in Saddles, but is now called the Shogun, who is a bit more clever than before, but also a lot less horny for his secretary.
Work, 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 work. Hello, boys. Have a good night's rest. I missed you.
As for the rest, most are nothing more but pointless and ineffective comic reliefs. But the one that I'll admit has the most amount of good jokes is Sumo, who plays the Mongo of the feature with his comedic super strength. And then there's Emiko, who is not based on anyone in Blazing Saddles, but rather is the kid for the younger viewers to connect with, as she is both the most brave and the most logical out of anyone in Kakamucho. She is also the most annoying character of the picture because of how she feels so manufactured, like the kind of feisty cuteness that is demanded by the executives for the purpose of selling toys and marketing, more so than to create a genuine personality.
Wait, why not?
Your sword's on backwards?
No, it's not, actually. Is it? Do you know how this is supposed to go?
I know a few things about samuraiing.
At best, maybe this is not the worst cast I've seen. Some of the acting is pretty good, and others can be humorous at times, but when looking at all the characters as a whole, they're just an empty shell of their live-action counterparts. Looks like the internet is wrong. You actually can make Blazing Saddles in this day and age. It's just that you'd have to get rid of everything that made Saddles a good movie so that the kids can watch it and then quickly forget about it afterwards. Paws of Fury: The Legend of Hank takes the 1974 classic comedy and turns it into an unappealingly bland kids flick. As much as it was an interesting concept that had some potential, it has none of Mel Brooks' signature edge, and it caused the film to have a boringly generic story, animation that's decent at best, characters that are generally weak and sometimes unlikable, there's not enough action to have this be engaging, and there's not enough comedy that's actually funny to have this be enjoyable. To be honest, I find it hard to recommend this picture to anyone. Why watch this when Blazing Saddles is just the better version of Paws of Fury in every way? Even when it comes to the kids, what's the point of having them watch this when the minions can do a better job to make them laugh and grab their attention? Also, it's worth noting that as this technically is a Nickelodeon movie, there's an animated short that comes before the film called Bad Hamster, based on the Nick series Big Nate. Personally, I've never watched the show, and I don't know if this is what they usually do in Big Nate, but that short was weird. Maybe the mixed media animation is interesting, but this is just weird in the way where it left me completely confused as to what I watched. No joke, during my screening when this was on, there was a woman who came next to me and asked, "Am I in the right theater? Is this Paws of Fury?" I mean, after witnessing a giant talking hamster farting out little gremlin hamsters, I don't blame her. She was probably better off subscribing to my channel and watch some videos that make a lot more sense than that cartoon. But rather it be with Nate or Hank, it was just not a good experience all around. And I'm gonna give this picture the Animat seal of garbage. I think it's safe to say that after all these years, this was not worth the wait.
What the mother, father, cocker spaniel's going on here?